Well, let me describe the scene to you. And we did go over this at length on Pat Chat yesterday as regards the composition and how we might all approach the scene. And we had a number of different suggestions about some adjustments that you might do to the composition. But we have a beautiful street scene here of, and I need to get my pronunciation correct. This is in the Montreal. This is southwest of Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And of course, French-speaking Canada. And this is by Durfay. I believe that's the correct pronunciation, by Durfay. The complete description will be in the posting, so you can look it up on Google. But we are looking south. The photograph, Ravi informs me, was taken about 9:30 in the morning, and he was avoiding all the joggers in the area. It's a popular jogging spot. And we're looking south down to St. Anne Street, I believe, where there's a figure down there in the middle and a car coming up the road. We're looking towards Lac St. Louis, and that is part of the St. Lawrence River there. We all heard of that, so we can try and imagine where it is. This is going to be an experiment, an experience of a number of different things in watercolor. First of all, trying to get the colors of those leaves, those fantastic colors, yellows, oranges, reds, still some green, still some greenery up there in the canopy, some dark purple ones as well, all sorts of different warm colors intermingling with each other. And then interspersed in the canopy, we can see exposed some tree trunks and branches. They're quite attractive as well. So we've got the colors of fall. We've got to think about depth. So we are looking over the Lac St. Louis. We just go back. Hang on a second. There we go. For some reason, my image minimized itself. We're looking over the Lac St. Louis to the far shore, trying to get that sense of depth. We've got simplification to deal with all of the posts, particularly on the right-hand side, all of those posts. The cars on the left-hand side. Perspective features here. We're looking downhill a little bit. Can we try and get the feeling of the gradient of the road going downhill? We've got also figures, maybe some figures in there. We've got some leaves on the ground as well. The green grass on the right-hand side, light and shade. There's not a lot of darks in this. There are some darks underneath the cars, but there's some light in there, light at the end of the road, light in the bottom left-hand corner, light on the side of the street, on the right-hand side. Down the bottom of the street, there's some light down there as well. So lots of challenges await us with this one. Let me go back to me. There we go. Right, let me describe my materials to you. My normal Saunders Waterford watercolor paper, which is 300 grams, 140 pounds in weight, 15 inches by 11 inches. Paints are from Mark Japman. I've got neutral tint, it's normal palette, neutral tint, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, spring green, viridian green, cobalt green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, English oxide or light red, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow, lovely bright yellow. And then along the bottom, I've got lavender down here. Just about hopefully make that out. Let me just see if I can make it a bit brighter. There we go. Lavender and a couple of gouache paints here, which again I'll be using. Lemon yellow gouache and white gouache. Brushes wise, I will be using mainly 4 brushes. A lot of my brush of the moment, a Tintoretto synthetic mop brush with a good point. Hopefully You can see that there. Good point and a good edge to it. Then a small round synthetic brush, smallish in size. A 1/2 inch flat synthetic brush as well from San Rafael. And a rigger brush, an Levinson rigger brush. Might be using that for all of those cables going across the street and down the right-hand side. Right, let me just check for any questions then before I make a start. All right, let me just check. Okay, no questions. Good. Right, let's crack on then. Drawing-wise, think where you're going to start drawing. For me, the choice is either the row of cars, starting to get in the row of cars on that left-hand side, or possibly the area of the lake that we can see in the distance, in the kind of middle distance. I think I might actually go for the cars on this one. And when you look at the source photo, there is a car that you can just see the side of it. I'm going to miss that one out, all right? And I'm imagining, we discussed this on Pat Chat as well about the composition. I'm going to move the cars a little bit to the right-hand side. The street might go a little bit narrower, but that doesn't matter. It is quite a wide street. All right, then. So first car, the all-important car. And try and think of these cars all as one object. They're all connected with each other. And generally also look at the, if you imagine a line across the tops of the cars, it does go down a little bit, all right? Kind of that sort of angle. Ever so slightly. And then the bottom will be almost level. But let's get in the top, the near lead car. That rough sort of shape there. And now we've got, how many cars have we got? 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 6 cars. So we're going to finish maybe somewhere around there. And as we go down, we can see less of each car. So a little bit more of this one. And another one. And then number 4. And number 5. Maybe just have a little bit more of that one showing, so we're keeping it fairly random, the spacing. Maybe make this one a bit taller. And put a rubber here somewhere. I'll come back to that. Right. There's my cars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The road at the end of the street is around about halfway down the end car. So that's the end of the street there. Try and make it fairly level. In the photo, it's just at a slight angle. Now, up the right-hand side, we've got the road, the actual side of the road, and the stones sort of like a little tiny, almost like a little tiny retaining wall going down to the bottom right corner. That gives us a little bit more of the perspective as well. So the side of that little tiny, those little tiny blocks at the top, and then we've got the lawns, the grass going over to the right. Down the end of the street, we have the side of the house with a funny piece jutting out of it. We were deciding on Pat Chat whether to include that, but let's just get in that. That side of the house, and then beyond that, we've got the far side of the shore, drawing in the top of the trees on the far side very lightly. You can probably just about see that, but the shoreline, I can get that in a bit darker. There we are. And the shoreline is a little bit below the eaves of the roof. Now, just in front of this house, there's a number of different trees and shrubs. A sort of roundish one there, and then another one behind it, and then a sort of conifer tree there. Now, on the left-hand side, a major element, the trees that we've got on the left-hand side. So the angle of those, the edge of those trees is a little bit like that. Roughly, I may not follow this in painting, but just define the right-hand edge of those left trees. And then there's various trunks, tree trunks above the cars up to the bottom of the canopy like that. And now and again, we can see some branches, limbs coming out. The side of the street, left-hand side of the street, a little bit like that. Now, I'm going to have to make sure we can't see this side on the photo, but I'm going to have to take my lead from the right-hand side and think that the angle, I think Ravi took this photo maybe right in the middle of the road. So the angle will be about the same. So if that's like that sort of angle there, then we're going to need that sort of angle on that side. Right, make sure those cars look all right. Back to the right-hand side now, and flip side of the left, the trees coming out. There's a lovely tree at the top in the middle that's almost on fire with the colors. And then it's quite open, and we can see some branches, thin branches, connecting it to the main trunk that's hidden behind a very yellow tree. And then coming closer towards us, there's more of a greenish tree with long, I can't actually see in the photo whether it's a conifer tree, but it's quite a pleasing green coming down to, and I think there's some residential houses on the right hand side, coming down to a roundish bush that is on a similar level to the bottom of the cars on the left. So it's sort of around about there. So round bush, bottom of the round bush. I'm going to ignore the bins, the trash cans, the wheelie bins on the right hand side. I'm going to ignore the car that's coming up the road. There are some utility poles and there's some nice cabling running between them. And one of those, the furthest pole, is just like that. Maybe another one in there. And they're obviously with perspective, they're going higher up on the right hand side. So I'm just going to get in 3. 1, 2, 3. There is this lovely diamond sign with the hump warning. I'm going to get that in there. So that's going to be that bright yellow. Continuing on the right-hand side, the lawns, they do rise ever so slightly. There's a pathway here. And then darker in there. All sorts of things going on, posts and things. Ignore the wheelie bins. An addition that I discussed that I was going to do on Pat Chat was the inclusion of a figure. I think this area here, yes, we've got some lovely shadows coming across the road, quite a pleasing pattern of shadows going across the road, and leaves strewn all over the place as well. But wouldn't it be nice to have a figure in here, maybe silhouetted against the lake? So a darker figure, either coming towards us or walking down the road, but some area of interest over on this right-hand side. Now, the height of a figure. Taking your car as a reference point, and the top of the car might be about the top of, on the same level, the top of someone's shoulder. If your figure was right here, then the figure would be around about that sort of height. Let's have mine though a little bit further down the road, and not a jogger. Here we are, a darker figure. Indication of legs. Start with the head, get the body in, but trying to take some point of reference in your picture to that figure. I think that is about it. Let's make sure that bottom of the roof is level and horizontal. Okay, painting wise, well, there'll be several stages of this. Of course, working light to dark. I'm going to, first of all, go in with a light wash, covering the whole of my scene with that sky color, that greenish, a greenish blue, top half of the scene, and then the bottom half, looking at the color of the road, trying to get that color. A little bit lighter down here, a little bit darker over here. Cover the whole scene, apart from these cars. I'm going to paint around those cars. Paint around the cars, leave the paper showing through those, and then next painting stage, when that is dry, and I will most likely use my hairdryer to speed things up, then go in with the background of the lake itself, and then the foliage, starting with some bright yellows, well, my cadmium yellow, for example, and then the oranges, and then the reds, and then maybe going darker red with a bit of alizarin crimson. Let that dry a little bit, and then add in some darker areas as well. Oh, I'll slip in some greens as well. I've got some greens on the right-hand side, greens in the distance there. So we're gradually going darker, and then next step will be getting in the building. Actually, the building might be the same stage as the foliage, but getting in that building, the foliage in front of it, then the cars, the darker areas of the cars, put in those shadows, gradually going with those darks, get in the poles of the utility poles there, the figure, and then we're almost down to the detail stage. The lines, little dabs of paint for the leaves, a little bit of shadows. Some of the leaves are light, some of them are dark. Yeah, the finer details. Then I might need a little bit of white paint just to get some extra highlights into certain areas. Some of the poles are catching the light. Some of the lines are catching the light as well. Perhaps a little bit of light on the figure and some of the leaves. That's the plan. Let me just see if there's any questions. Hopefully, Jim, you sorted yourself out now. Okay. Right. Let me just find my eraser if I can. There we are. I just want to rub out that area there. Make sure you've got a clean rubber, because that bit there was going to be a little bit higher, and then it goes a bit lower. So there's almost like a step pattern here. I've gone a bit low with that lead car. It's quite high up in the photograph because it's a good distance away from the other 5 cars, but I've gone a little bit lower. Right, so painting then. Before I lay down the wash, I want to make sure my sky area is painted onto a damp surface. So I'm just going to, with my mop brush with some clear water on it, just going to make sure that that top area there is evenly damp, just the top half of my paper. It's going to make sure that my wash will go on evenly. I could apply this water with a sponge, that would have speeded things up, or a flat brush, but as I've got my mop brush, this will do. Not too much, I don't want it dripping wet. And in fact, if too much water's gone on, then I can just mop it up, lift it off with a damp sponge. So the color of the sky, well, I think it's going to be a greeny blue, and I think that a greenish sky is going to contrast lovely with the yellow of the leaves and the orange of the leaves as well. I think it might, those two might go together. It really does help with that sort of autumnal time of year. So I've got my cobalt green here. It is a fairly light part of the scene. Make sure it's applied nice and smoothly over that area there. Maybe a little bit darker, so I'm going in with a stronger mix, a little bit darker at the top. And basically now cover just want to get rid of this white paper. Come down, paint around these cars. We'll be doing this a few times. I think I got 7 cars, or actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 7 cars. Doesn't matter. And then up the left-hand side of that lead car. Now transferring into the light area, the light color of the road surface. For this, I'm going to go with a fairly weak mixture of, let me think now, ultramarine blue and a bit of burnt sienna. See how that pretty much equal. It's always quite a good road surface color, the combination of those. Paint around the bottom of those cars. Now, this doesn't necessarily need to be laid on flat. It can be quite attractive having different intensities of that color as you might get on a road surface. But generally, you can see my dabbing motion with the brush, rather up the top, nice controlled lines, making sure those beads don't come down into the paper, but nice controlled lines. And then down on the road surface, generally quite light in that left-hand corner there. So make sure it's lighter down there, and then going darker, a little bit darker, combination of those, a bit darker in this bottom right-hand corner. And that side, that little side raised wall is a similar color to the road, maybe a little bit lighter. Mop up the bead at the bottom. And the top is a little bit lighter. So I'm just lifting off with the brush. There we go. Oh, Ron is asking, is one figure enough? Well, maybe you can get in 2 if you want to. Up to you. Right. I'm going to dry this now before going on to the background and then we're gradually coming our way towards us, and then we'll get in that foliage as well. So excuse the noise, everyone. Normally with Crowdcast, it does, my microphone suddenly blanks itself out with the loud noise, but anyway, just in case. There we go. Maybe not paint immediately on that surface because it might still be quite warm using a hairdryer. Your paper will just dry maybe a bit too quickly. So just let that cool down a little bit. So background foliage. It is quite autumnal over there. We can see in the trees yellows and oranges, but we don't want to go too intense because that's going to bring it forward. So a little bit of a light glazing over that area with that autumnal color. So a weak wash. Generally of the same colors, hues that we're going to be using shortly. On the main areas. So I've started with a little bit of a weak wash of alizarin crimson, and then let's go a little bit more, a little bit warmer. And then things go a little bit darker towards the base, just a little bit darker. So I've got something dark up here on my palette from a previous painting. Pop in a little bit of color just to introduce a bit of darkness in there, but because we're painting wet in wet, we're going to get soft edges appearing there. Right, the Lac St. Louis. The Lac St. Louis is a more intense color of the sky. It's a greeny blue. So I've got this area here that I was mixing the sky with. Let's go with a little bit of cerulean blue and a little bit of that cobalt green. Let's just see if that gives me the right. Value-wise, it's just a little bit darker than the sky, just a little bit. Perhaps a little bit more cobalt green. Make sure we mix it. There we go. It's bleeding a little bit up there, but that doesn't matter. That could be some reflections or something. Next, let's just dry this quickly because I want to get in that side of that house before we do the foliage left and right. I'm going to get out the hairdryer again. So the house, I'm going to do this area here now, the house and these shrubs in the front of that house. I can see there's a question. Hang on a second. Oh, I think that was Ron asked that earlier. Is one figure enough? And well, you could put 2 or 3 in there if you want to. You could have some joggers in there as well if you wanted. Ron, be my guest. I'm just going to stick one, keep it nice and simple. Now, the house, keep that simple as well. Something dark. Actually, let me just do the foliage first of all. So something. Try and get the color of that lead rub. A darkish green. And down to the bottom of the road. And then the house itself is, it's a two-tone. The top level looks like it's timber clad, and the bottom one the ground story looks like it's stone clad. Let's keep it all the same color. Keep it quite dark. So I'm going in with a ultramarine blue and burnt umber. A very simple silhouetted shape of the house. Down to the top of the bushes. Try and get a nice straight edge on the right hand side. And there is that funny thing that is jutting out. Really don't know what it is. There's a sort of funny hut or something down the bottom as well. There. Now I want to fill in this area here, coming over to the above the area above the area of the cars, the row of cars on the left, and something dark. So viridian green, burnt umber, a little bit of ultramarine blue, viridian green, burnt umber. Need to go a bit greener. Careful now, because I'm starting to go in darker around the tops of these cars. And then darker at the base. Darker at the base of those bushes as well. That should be right. Let that dry, see how dark it is. Might need to go a little bit darker to get that contrast between the light of the cars and the dark of the background. That could turn out quite nice from a contrast point of view. Okay, there's another question. Oh no, it's gone. All right. Next then, foliage time. This is where we're going to have a bit of fun applying the yellows. I'm going to start with yellow, a bright yellow, and then, well, I'm basically starting at the bottom here and working my way up to maybe a little bit of the yellows and crimson, and then a little bit of the green as well on some of the, just a little bit of green on some of the trees on that right-hand side. And we've got the lawns as well, the grass on that right-hand side. I will start then with the yellow on the left. Make sure my brush is clean. Still sticking with the mop brush and a little bit of cadmium yellow with my brush, just applying that again with a sort of dabbing motion. And there's a bit of light coming in through the bottom of these trees that's quite attractive. So get that in there. A little bit of light. The light coming in that bottom area. Now, the yellow on the right-hand side, that kind of middle band. So it starts off yellow, but then goes a little bit more of an orangey color. I think that's it for the yellow. Now on to cadmium orange, or an orange. Where can we see that? Definitely there. And I'm going up to the yellow in places. The left-hand side is also a little bit darker than the right-hand side, so just bear that in mind. Now, this fiery little bit of cadmium red for this. Then just observe the shape of the bushes there. The shape of the canopy. I'm going in with a little bit of alizarin crimson, but going a bit darker with adding a little bit of ultramarine blue. Now the same color mix on the left-hand side. Let's start with the reds in here. Eventually I've got to cover the whole area so that I've got no sky really showing through. And a little bit darker in this top right of these trees on the left. It's a little bit of greenery. I go a bit darker down here. And then a little bit of green at the base of these trees, which is really looking through the trunks. We're seeing some of the foliage behind. There's all sorts going on here. Browns, greens. Carefully down to the tops of these cars. I'm just sort of making up that left-hand area because it's not in the photo. I'm imagining that's sort of some foliage over there. Let's get in a little bit more green here and there, and then darker in here. So you're really going wet in wet now. You need to go a bit darker in this top right corner. And and then stronger green, stronger green down the bottom right. Okay, over to the right-hand side. And a bit more of the warm colours around this yellow area here. Now the grass, I've got my spring green, quite a light green. And it's fairly light down there. It's fairly light down the right-hand corner, but then it gets a little bit more intense as we come up. So I'm painting up to the side of that low wall. And we can leave little bits of the paper showing through. There could be some brighter leaves lying on the ground that are just catching the light. There we go. Now this green area here. Start with a lighter green. And a lot of the branches here are horizontal. They're like a curved horizontal. So I'll go with a darker green in a minute. Now, as we come down to this area here, there's a bare tree, and then there are some darker, there's a darker warmish foliage tree behind, but just trying to think of the overall color of those. Don't think about too much detail. And then this shrub here, this round shrub. It's a similar shrub, I reckon, to that one there. And we're going darker in the base in a minute. Okay, how damp is that? A little bit too damp. While this is still damp, just think about your edges, getting in some darker shapes, but because my paper's still damp, I can get in some soft edges still. It's quite a bit darker here, I reckon. So Virgin green, burnt umber, a little bit of warmth. Now I've got to be careful not to make it too mix in too many colors, otherwise you might get the dreaded mud. Just keep working at it. Different sizes of shapes. Try and get in the soft edges. Right, I think that area, I need to get in some darker green branches coming across. This is quite damp, so I might get away with it if I go in really thick with that dark green, not too much water. Else I'll have to get the hairdryer out and just dry it a little bit, which I think I actually might do. I can see a shine on the surface. It is quite wet there. Excuse me again. That's a bit better. So a darker green, ridging green, burnt umber. And these generally horizontal limbs that are coming out on that right-hand side. To me, it looks like a little bit like some sort of conifer. Of course, where the paper is dry and getting a harder edge, which doesn't matter. I'm going to use a little flat brush now to get in some darks. So my 1/2 inch flat brush and yeah, a little bit more up there. So flat brush, not too much water on this brush, and ridging green, burnt umber, a little bit of ultramarine blue, and then now these harder edges doesn't matter closer to us because these trees are near us, so we're going to see some of those harder edges appear. Burnt umber, ridging green. So I'm applying this cadmium orange and red quite thickly, not too much water. And then similarly on the right hand side. There's this tree here, this bare tree, and it's almost like a fan shape. Then some darker colour for the bottom of these roundish shrubs. Similar to what I was doing over here, ridging green, burnt umber, bit of ultramarine blue, and then there we are. Hopefully looks like a sort of succession of bushes coming out that right hand side. We are now ready for cars and shadows going across the road. Let me just see if there's any questions. Okay, no. So stick with my mop brush. And first of all, the colour of those cars. Now, those cars look to me, they're all pretty much the same darkish metallic, of course, that metallic shiny colour. So let's just keep the tops light, and well, there might be a little bit of reflection on this lead windscreen here, just a little bit. But generally the bottom's a lot darker. And then we got the connecting the darkness of those cars with these shadows going across. And let's put my shadow in that area there. Cars then. Cerulean blue. Burnt sienna. Light coming from the left-hand side. So we've got the top left-hand side of these cars. Bright, and then make the bottom right of these cars darker. Just have that windscreen a bit darker there. And then really dark for the bottom of these cars. So neutral tint, burnt umber, ultramarine blue. Paint of the cars is still wet. So we're getting a nice, soft edge. There. A little bit of shadow, sorry, reflection from that windscreen there. Right, reflections. They're not very dark reflections, these. Bit of cobalt blue in this mix, so don't go too dark. It's not your sort of Mediterranean intense dark shadows, and very thin in thickness in the distance. Just a few down here. A little bit light there. I guess where the light's coming underneath the canopy and the shadow of the trees is being cast on that right-hand side. So I'm using cobalt blue for this, quite a weak mixture. Up to the right-hand side of the road, there's a little bit of a gap in some of these areas, but generally it's all, we're covering the road with those shadows. You need to be a bit careful now with my lines. Try and make them a little bit thicker. A little bit darker as well, to change the intensity of some of these shadows. Over that left-hand side. Over to the little low wall. And then we need to go up that wall in a few places. Up the wall, little horizontal, sorry, little vertical. Little horizontal. And then a horizontal going across the top. And a dark green going across the grass for a continuation of those shadows. Gradually coming to life. Now, what I need to get in now, just think about it, more of the details. We're almost getting to the detail stage now. So that's going to be those tree trunks, the poles, more detail on the cars, the figure, maybe something in that building down there, just to find some of these bushes a little bit more down the bottom of the street. There. So over to my small synthetic round brush. And let's get into some of these tree trunks then. A bit of lost and found. So the tree trunks are, they're more exposed, just coming up above the tops of the cars, and then they disappear into the canopy, and then here and there they reappear. And of course, they're getting thinner, narrower towards the top as well. So a darker color for this. Not too much water on the brush, but we don't want a dry brush technique. Bit of burnt umber, bit of ultramarine blue. And then the start of your tree trunks. Now, look at the photo. Don't make these tree trunks appear too perfect. They're crossing each other, disappearing, reappearing. Gradually fading away. And as we go down the street, they're closer together. And narrower as well. Try and get some branches up in the middle of these trees now. And so think about where some disappear and might reappear. A few coming in from the left-hand side. burnt umber, ultramarine blue. Nice hard edge against the cars. Just define the bottom of that roof a bit more, make it a bit more house-like, and the middle story, possibly a window or two. Cars, a bit more detail on the cars. We've got some wing mirrors and then the front grills and bumpers and headlights. And some of these darker shapes, they'll make like that darker area there, that second car, that's hopefully making the first car. We can see where that ends now. Next car down. Then one with a darker windscreen for some reason. The car closest to us, I'll just put a little bit more detail on the windscreen. Oops. And something, pick up a bit of lavender, something a bit bluer on the windscreen. There. Bigger. Oh, let's get some tree trunks on this right-hand side as well. Burnt umber, ultramarine blue, starting with this far tree. And I could use a rigger brush for this, but I want to get in some of those thinner branches. And they disappear behind this yellow. They disappear behind this yellow tree. Now coming closer towards us, we've got some branches crossing the yellow tree. So maybe there's some kind of intermediate tree, or perhaps there's a tree on this right-hand side that is out of view that's throwing these branches across. And then this fan-shaped tree. pretty dark underneath that bush. Continue on with just a few more of these branches. Some more on this side. Of course, the more you look, the more branches you find. The danger is then you can just overdo it. So be careful. I'm trying to say to myself, of course, as always in painting, the trick is knowing when to stop. Let's get into the figure and some leaves now. Figure. I'll stay with this dark theme. There is a figure in the photo that is fairly darkly clothed. Let's just keep, so not black, but something fairly dark, and starting with the head. Then walking towards us. And some leaves now. Back to the bright colours again. There's loads of leaves over this side. You've got to imagine where the leaves are falling. So of course, right underneath the trees, and then generally down the middle of the road with the traffic, maybe the leaves are dispersed, so there might be less leaves in the middle, and then they accumulate along the side of the road. Let's think about that a little bit. Start off, I think generally these leaves, so leaves are, they turn that sort of yellowish color, don't they? Green and yellow, and then a darker color, and then they kind of, that's when they fall to the ground. And so let's keep with the fairly mid orange color. And so these leaves, they're going to be flat shapes. There'll be an accumulation of more leaves in places. And then a bit of yellow. This is rather time consuming, but a very important element of this street scene, I think, to get in the impression of these fallen leaves. You could use splattering for this, but it might be a bit too erratic, and you might prefer more control with the brush. A few little leaves on the right hand side, not go too light. So they're gathering on the side of the road here. A few more. Perhaps there's some falling as we speak. I said on Pat Chat yesterday I wasn't going to do this, but yeah, a few little leaves falling. Now, after we put these leaves in, let's put in some darker leaves. So burnt umber or burnt sienna. And then maybe a few leaves on the tops of the cars. And then dark shadow underneath some of these leaves, just where they're in the sunlight. Again, apologies for this. This is quite laborious, but just picking up on a few of them, maybe a few in the on the grass there. Just a few little darker shadows against some of them. Some of these lighter areas here, I could just exploit those a bit with a bit of dark shadow. Some flesh color for this figure. Right, poles and lines, and then I'm about done, I reckon. Right, so I've got 3 poles, 1, 2, and 3, thin, slightly thickest, obviously, with perspective. Now, the poles are going to be, let's use a bit of lavender and a bit of this yellow ochre. And then very carefully get in my furthest pole. And then the next one, a bit thicker. Where's this one going to be? Here. And the height of this one is about there. And then one here that's crossing the yellow foliage. So this one is let's have this one disappearing above the top of the paper. Go a little bit darker. Need more water on my brush, it's going too dry. Down to the base there. I'll get in the yellow sign in a minute. So some cables that go all over the place. Rigger brush is probably best for this, for me. You could use, if you want to, you could use a brush pen or a felt tip pen, you know, for doing those lines if you wanted to. So I've got a brush pen here and a few lines like that. But let's see how we get on with a rigger brush. Not too dark for this paint, and all sorts of different angles as well. And of course, there's cables between the poles themselves. Just define this curve just a bit more. All right, I'm going to get my hair dry out now, hopefully for the final time. Just dry this area here so I can get on the yellow sign and some white gouache for some extra highlighting on some of these cables, particularly against the darker background, would come out quite nice. Excuse me a second. Bring a brush again, make sure it's clean after all that dark paint. Nearly there. That's a bit better. And we'll take some white paint right out of the tube. White gouache. And now the water to gouache level ratio is important here. Not too dry, not too watery, otherwise it goes sort of milky. So, and gouache does tend to dry quite quickly as well on your brush. See, I can tell that's a little bit too watery at the moment, so my brush was had too much water on it when I went into the tube. Anyway, make sure I've got a thin line, and just in a few little places we've got the lighter highlighting showing. Maybe over here as well. And then a little bit of highlighting on the left-hand side of the pole with the light coming from the left. Makes them show up a bit more. Can we do anything on the left-hand side? It's a bit of shine on some of the cars, just a tiny bit. There we go. Okay, yellow sign, yellow triangular hump sign, and let's put the top back on my QR. Now, I could use pure cadmium, but I'm just mixing a bit of my cadmium yellow with a bit of gouache just to dull it down a bit. I don't want it to stand out too much because it's in the photo, it is actually in the shade. Right, what kind of height shall we have it? Or should we put on that one? No, put on this one. It's going to show up more. Right, a square. Put it right about there. Down to the corner. Try and get some clean edges. It's going to make quite a big hump sign, I think. Oh, I do need to dry that a bit so I can speed up the process. I apologize. I said I wasn't going to use more anymore. Hang on a second. Bit of black now, or neutral tint for the actual sign itself. We've got a very faint line around the perimeter of the sign. And then slap bang in the middle is this dark line with a sort of pyramid point on it. There we go. I think I am about done. Our street scene, our November project, the Baie de Fay area, southwest of Montreal, looking south to the Lac Saint Louis, and these autumnal, these trees with their fall, their autumnal color. Yeah, so watch out for the posting on Patreon tomorrow for full instructions for those of you that are on the critique level, and you get a video critique from me. And as I normally do at this point of proceedings, if there's anybody that would like to come on screen, we'll see if we have better luck than last time. Anyone like to come on screen?